Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and welcome back to the NBA as well. This is a video that I'm not sure that I ever really thought I was going to make because I've made multiple videos over the past couple of weeks and months saying that I felt like from a logistical and from a timeline and from a safety standpoint, it was going to be very difficult for the NBA to resume the season this year. I very much hope that I'm proven wrong and that a couple of weeks from now, there's a plan in place to return to play and they're doing it safely and everything works out well. I just personally don't see that as a realistic possibility, and like I said, I hope I'm proven wrong, but that's just kind of where I'm at right now about the NBA potentially returning to play. But they figured out a way to do it. Everybody has agreed to it with the exception of the NBA Players Association, who will be voting tomorrow. And as D-Flow pointed out to me on Twitter a few days ago, he was like, well, didn't you tell everybody the league was going to be suspended and not come back this year? I've never been happier to be wrong, and I'm excited to, one, have some actual news to talk about, and of course to have the NBA back is great as well. I've got a lot of notes here, a lot of things to talk about. I still have some reservations about this new plan from the NBA. We're going to go through the entire thing, and I'm really excited that the NBA is back, and hopefully that everything is going to go down safely. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy the NBA, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day. Okay, briefly, let's run down the things that we know of now after the vote has been passed by the NBA. Let's go over some big picture facts here. So the season is going to start back July 31st in Orlando at Disney's Wide World of Sports in Florida. There are going to be 22 teams invited down to Orlando, 9 in the East, 13 in the West. Every single team that goes down there is going to play 8 regular season games, and then they're going to go into the postseason. And the seeding that we had before the season was suspended is going to remain as is. And if you are a team that is not currently in the postseason, if you get within 4 games of the 8th seed by the time these 8 games are over, then that opens up the possibility of a play-in tournament, and details on that are to be determined, and details on how the postseason format could be altered in terms of potentially shortening first round series. Those details have not come out yet either. So I'm really interested in what exactly the play-in tournament is going to entail. I've seen different things, but it hasn't really been confirmed, so I don't feel comfortable kind of talking about those things. But those are the things that we know for sure. And the first interesting point for me in this is the 8 games, and more specifically the strength of schedule aspect of it, because this was one of the issues with just going straight into the postseason. Was there are teams that played more difficult or easier schedules earlier in the season, and then we're going to have more difficult or more easy schedules in the remaining part of the season they didn't get to play because it was suspended. And now with the ability to potentially change your playoff standing with these 8 games, how the NBA is going to come up with an entirely new schedule is going to be a really interesting process to evaluate and take a look at, because obviously they can't use the other schedule because not all 30 teams are going to be down there. So you can't just play who you would have normally played in your next 8 games, but you also have to, and reportedly they will, incorporate what would have been those teams' strength of schedule into their new schedule down in Orlando. So for example, the Grizzlies and the Pelicans are 2 teams that are fighting for the 8th seed in the Western Conference. And they had a very large difference in terms of how easy or how difficult their schedule was going to be the rest of the way. And if I'm remembering it correctly, the Grizzlies had a tough strength of schedule the rest of the way, and the Pelicans had a easier strength of schedule the rest of the way in their season that they would have played had the league not gotten suspended. So you want to make sure you're incorporating that. And so are the Pelicans going to be playing easier teams than the Grizzlies are in these 8 games? You would assume so, and that obviously can impact the race for the 8th seed. So that schedule, how they incorporate the strength of schedule from the previously remaining games that they would have played pre-suspension, is one of the more interesting, and in my opinion, one of the more difficult basketball aspects to balance here, without even considering all of the safety protocols and things like that they're going to have to go into. And then the other part of that is I don't know how the play-in tournament thing is going to work, because on one hand, in the East, it seems relatively simple, right? Because it seems like they're going to keep their conferences, and if the Wizards get within 4 games of the Magic, the Nets, or whoever the 8th seed ends up being in the Eastern Conference, then there would be a play-in game or tournament between those 2 teams. And the way that I saw it in a couple of different articles was the 8th seed would only have to win 1 game, whereas the team that was in the 9th seed would have to win 2 games. So it's kind of a best of 3, but a weird best of 3. And then that would be how you determine the 8th seed. I don't know how in the world it's going to work in the Western Conference, because there could be multiple teams within 4 games of the 8th seed. So still more details to be determined there on the play-in tournament. But the most important and the most critical part of the basketball side of this for me is the timeline of these events. And we got more details about that today. That's why I wanted to wait until after the vote today rather than when a lot of this information was leaking yesterday. So we had a few more confirmed dates. So Game 7 of the finals is supposed to be October 12th. That is the drop dead, the season has to be over date for the NBA Finals that we have been given over the last few days and then confirmed again today. The interesting part about that, though, is that opening night for the following season is December 1st. So next season is supposed to start December 1st, and training camp is supposed to start November 10th. So in between October 12th, or a few days earlier, if the finals don't go the full 7 games, in between October 12th and December 1st, which is not even 2 full months, you're supposed to do an entire offseason free agency draft, presumably some kind of summer league, even though it won't be in the summer. That's an event that has gotten bigger and bigger over the last few seasons, and the NBA is probably going to try and find a way to run something similar to the summer league. And then, as I said, training camp and a handful of other offseason activities like the lottery and things like that. We've gotten some confirmed dates on the draft and the lottery, but that is such a condensed timeline for an offseason in terms of a recovery standpoint for players that are going deep into the postseason, as well as all the events that you have to run in that timeline. That makes things difficult. And the weird part was, I had assumed that next season would start on Christmas Day, because that has been something that has been circulating pretty much ever since they started moving towards a return to play plan. It was basically assumed that next season would start on Christmas Day, but this is, a handful of weeks even earlier than that date that we had presumed, and that can always change and be moved around. But that seems like a very aggressive timeline for the turnaround of these players, even understanding they just had this couple month layoff. These guys are used to having, months in the offseason to recover, and they're not even going to have 2 full months before the start of next season to do that. So some really, really interesting new dates that we got as of today. And then the other part of this is typically a full postseason with travel days and with rest and everything in the NBA lasts about 2 months. Last year, it was exactly 2 months. It was like April 13th to June 13th. This year, they're giving themselves 2.5 months. So if you're going from July 31st, as I said, to mid-October, they're giving themselves 2.5 months to play 88 games, do a possible play-in tournament if needed, and then a full postseason with only 2 extra weeks in addition to what they would normally give themselves for a regular postseason. Now, obviously, this is an entirely different circumstance, and there's no travel days, which is significant. Teams don't need to go anywhere. They can be resting all the time when they're not playing. You can be playing all kinds of games at once because of the complex that they do have in Disney with the multiple courts and things like that. And it probably won't be as strenuous because of the lack of travel as it typically would be. There's no way they would normally do 88 games and a possible play-in tournament and a full postseason if they had travel involved. And I understand that, but that just seems like a lot, especially for older teams. And I'm sure I'll come out with a video over the next few days talking about which teams this new format helps and doesn't help. But that is going to be something to keep an eye on, is how constricted the new timeline is going to be because of all the games they are planning on playing. And I understand why the NBA went with this strategy, because they want to account for the strength of schedule in the regular season. They want to get to a certain amount of games for different TV and revenue deals. That makes complete sense to me as well. It seems like a lot to do in 2.5 months and then turn around and start the next season December 1st as well. And those dates can always change, but that seems like a lot to me to have these players do, especially if you're doing somewhat of a complicated play-in tournament in addition. So that's all the basketball stuff, and then that doesn't even get into the safety protocols, what happens if a player gets quarantined, how they're going to do security with Wide World of Sports right there, and then Disney is literally down the street. Like, how are they going to do all of those different things? There's still a ton of details and a ton of work that the NBA has to put in to make this all run smoothly, but it's definitely a positive sign that we have these dates, that people have agreed to return to play with a near unanimous vote, and it appears as though we are on our way to having the NBA and basketball back here within the next 5 to 6 weeks, which is a very, very welcome sight. And we'll have training camp, and then we'll go into some games July 31st, and then as we move into August. So it's going to be interesting to see how this new format affects the postseason, different players, older teams, younger teams, who ends up getting the 8th seed if we have a play-in tournament. And if these changes cross over into next season, are we going to start having season start in December and on Christmas every single year? Are we going to have a play-in tournament every single year? Those are some interesting things to keep an eye on moving forward as how this whole situation can impact the league long term. But regardless, this is good news, and I'm happy to finally make this video and say that the NBA, if all goes well, will be coming back here within the next 2 months. And yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.